Thanksgiving dinner was supposed to be warm, cranberry sauce, roasted turkey, and fake family smiles. I had barely taken a seat when my sister Haley raised her glass and said with a smirk, "How does it feel being the most useless one here, Lena?" Laughter erupted around the table. My father chuckled. My mother looked away and cousins exchanged amused glances. I used to shrink in moments like this. Say nothing. Smile politely. Swallow the shame. Not this time. I set down my fork, looked her straight in the eye, and asked calmly, "How does it feel when this useless one stops paying your bills?" Silence. Thick. Immediate. Her grin vanished. My father's fork hovered midair. My mother froze mashed potatoes, trembling on the spoon. That's when it all began, unraveling the lies, the debts, the truth they never thought I'd say out loud. And I wasn't done. I wasn't always the one people laughed at. Growing up, I was the quiet kid with perfect grades and too many responsibilities for a child. While other girls were sneaking lip gloss into school, I was sneaking grocery coupons into my backpack just in case Mom forgot the store list again. My older sister Haley was the golden own. Loud, beautiful, dramatic. She threw tantrums and got rewarded. I cleaned up her messes and got ignored. By 14, I had a part-time job shelving books at the local library. I'd walk there after school, do my homework in the break room, then clock in. The pay was small, minimum wage, but I remember the first time I handed my mom my check so she could buy groceries. She took it without hesitation and said, "You're such a good girl, Lena." That was the only thanks I ever got. That winter, our heating bill was overdue. I knew because I overheard my parents whispering about it after dinner, voices low and tight. Haley didn't notice as she was too busy painting her nails and talking about which boy might ask her to the snowflake formal. I stayed up that night calculating how many extra shifts I could take over Christmas break. I gave my parents $200 in cash. Dad clapped me on the shoulder like I just mowed the lawn. That's when I learned something important. Being quiet, helpful, and selfless didn't earn you love. It just made you useful. The pattern continued. Haley wrecked Dad's car the summer after her senior year. I covered the deductible with my entire savings. When Mom was sick and couldn't cook, I fed the family. I didn't complain. I just became what they needed. The duct tape holding everything together. Invisible but essential. People like me don't get seen until we stop performing. I remember one Christmas, Haley got a tablet from Dad, a spa voucher from Mom, and diamond earrings from her boyfriend. I got a robe. No card, no hug, just a robe. It's funny. I never thought I needed more. I convinced myself their silence meant trust, that their taking meant they believed in me. But the older I got, the more I realized that love, real love, isn't about what you can provide. It's about whether they'd still choose you when you have nothing left to give. And my family, they never chose me. By the time I turned 30, I was managing finances for 3 mid-sized startups. I worked remotely, made 6 figures, and still sent money home like a ghost donor. Haley always had some new emergency. I always covered it. But that Thanksgiving night, when she laughed in my face in front of the whole family, that was the last straw. I was 17 when my acceptance letter from UCLA arrived in the mail, along with a partial scholarship. It wasn't a full ride, but it was enough to finally leave, enough to prove to myself that all those late nights studying, all those weekends working double shifts had meant something. I remember holding that envelope like it was a golden ticket. I even let myself imagine walking through Manhattan in a proper coat, sipping coffee like the women I'd seen in finance magazines. For a brief moment, I felt seen by the world, if not by my family. But then Haley came home. She was 20 at the time and had just dropped out of a private college out west. Apparently, she was burned out and needed time to find herself. What she actually needed, I soon learned, was money. Her student loan debt was out of control. Her credit score was tanking and her boyfriend had just dumped her. I overheard the conversation late one night. Mom's voice hushed but frantic. "We don't have the savings to cover all this. Dad Lena's got that UCLA thing. Maybe she could go local help us out for a year or two." It wasn't even a discussion. It was a decision made about me, not with me. The next morning, over eggs and burnt toast, Mom looked across the table and said, "Sweetheart, have you considered community college? You'd be close to home. We could really use your help." I didn't argue. I just nodded. And when I called UCLA to decline the offer, the woman on the other end of the line sounded more heartbroken than I did. Instead, I enrolled at a local college in Boston, picked up 2 jobs, and quietly redirected the $30 I'd saved toward paying down Haley's loans. She never said thank you. She just posted pictures of herself on Instagram at rooftop brunches and captioned them, "Resetting my life gratitude." Every time I scrolled past one of her posts, I'd feel something twist in my chest, but I buried it. I told myself family came first, that someday someone would acknowledge what I'd given up. But acknowledgement never came. What came instead were more requests, more assumptions, that my money, my time, my emotional labor were communal property. Haley became the face of the family's pride. She's creative, spontaneous, a free spirit, they'd say at gatherings. And me, I was dependable, reliable, a living safety net. No one ever asked what I wanted. No one ever noticed how much I had lost. And for the longest time, I didn't notice it either until the Thanksgiving dinner when my sister laughed and something inside me finally snapped. That was the moment the silence I'd lived in for so long began to crack. By the time I turned 25, I had stopped expecting gratitude. Instead, I learned to brace for it, those familiar texts from Haley that always began with, "Hey sis, quick favor," and ended with a number, 600 for a new transmission, 300 for a last-minute school fee. 200 when her business partner ran off with half their cafe investment. I didn't even blink anymore. I'd just transfer the money and go back to work. I had a routine by then. Wake up at 6:30, brew coffee, answer emails from clients in London, review budgets for startups in New York, and spend my evenings crunching spreadsheets from a fold-out desk in my tiny apartment. I wasn't glamorous, but I was steady, predictable, quietly holding up the people who never thought to look down and see what I was standing on. Haley called me the money whisperer at family dinners. She meant it as a joke, but I wasn't whispering. I was screaming in silence. At one point, I was paying for my niece's school lunches because my sister's new marketing idea didn't pan out. I even bought Haley's kids winter coats one year because she hadn't gotten around to it yet. No one asked where the money came from. They just assumed Lena would take care of it. Lena always took care of it. I didn't realize how much resentment had built up until one Sunday afternoon when I opened my banking app and saw yet another overdraft notice from an account linked to Haley's cafe. I had connected my name to her business years earlier as a guarantor for credit score reasons. She'd said she never cleaned up the mess. She just moved on and I cleaned up the stains. I stared at the notification, my heart pounding, not from fear, but from a kind of angry clarity. What would happen, I wondered, if I just stopped? What if I didn't reply to her next text? What if I didn't show up to fix things? Would they even notice me? Would I become truly invisible? Would the world crack open from the weight they'd never learned to carry? That thought haunted me, more than I cared to admit. Because deep down, a part of me wasn't just afraid of being seen as useless. I was afraid that if I stopped being useful, I'd be nothing to them at all. Still, that seed of defiance had been planted. And just days before Thanksgiving, it would bloom into something dangerous, a decision, a refusal, a quiet breaking point wrapped in calm. All it needed was one final spark to ignite. And as it turned out, that spark would come wrapped in a wine-colored silk blouse and a voice dripping with contempt. 3 days before Thanksgiving, my phone lit up with a message from Haley. "Hey sis, got a sec? Need help with something real quick. Call me." I knew that tone. It wasn't an invitation. It was a transaction waiting to happen. I stared at the screen for a full minute before sighing and calling her back. She answered on the first ring. Finally, she said without a greeting, "So I'm expanding the cafe a second location. Super cute spot in Cambridge, but I need about $30K for the initial lease and setup. I figured you'd be the best person to ask, since you believe in family." Her voice was chipper, casual, like she was asking for a recipe. No, a fortune. I blinked. 30,000. "Yeah," she said breezily. "I mean, come on. You're always talking about budgets and investments and whatever. This is like your thing, right? Think of it as supporting a woman-owned small business. Girl power." I almost laughed. The same woman who once told me, "Finance is boring, who even needs that," was now reducing my entire career to girl power and a handout. "Becca," I said slowly, "that's a lot of money for you." She scoffed. "You make 6 figures. What else are you even doing with it? You don't have a husband or kids. You live in a shoebox and eat frozen meals." I felt something stir in my chest, something cold and electric. "You don't know how I live," I said, "and I'm not a bank." Silence. Then her tone shifted from cheerful to sharp. "Wow," she said. "So this is who you really are. Selfish, bitter, jealous, maybe? Just admit it. You like lording it over us, don't you? Always playing the quiet martyr." My jaw tightened. "No," I said, "I like boundaries." "You're unbelievable," she hissed. "After everything I've done for this family," I cut her off. "Everything you've done. Becca, I paid for your rent, your car, your kids' coats. I paid off your business loan in 2018 and never once brought it up. I believed in you when no bank would touch you." She fell silent. I didn't wait for her reply. "Don't worry," I added, voice calm but final. "This useless one won't be funding anything anymore." Then I hung up. My hands were shaking. For years, I had been their fixer, their wallet, their safety net. Saying no wasn't just about money. It was about reclaiming a self I had buried under invoices and wire transfers. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on my bedroom floor, surrounded by folders, bank statements, receipts, contracts, wire transfer proof of every time I had bailed them out, saved them from collapse. Haley thought I was useless. She had no idea just how much of her success had my fingerprints all over it. So I started organizing everything. If she wanted to humiliate me at Thanksgiving, I'd be ready. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't scared to be seen. Thanksgiving dinner smelled like cinnamon rosemary and tension. The dining table was stretched to its limit. Every leaf inserted, every chair pulled out. There was turkey stuffing mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, pumpkin pie, and a storm waiting to break. I arrived a few minutes late on purpose. Let them settle in. Let her get comfortable. Lena, sweetie, Mom called, standing up. "Come sit next to your sister?" "Of course." Haley was already mid-story when I walked in, one hand dramatically fluttering as she bragged about her cafe's new loyal customer base. Her nails were perfectly manicured. Her silk blouse looked expensive, and her voice had that sugary edge I knew too well. I took the seat beside her, folding my hands in my lap. Dinner began. Forks clinked, wine poured. Dad asked for the sweet potatoes. Someone passed the rolls. Then it came. Haley turned to me, a glint in her eye. "So, Lena," she said loudly, "how does it feel being the most useless one here?" The room fell quiet just for a beat and burst into laughter. Her husband chuckled. My cousin snorted. Even my father smirked. Mom looked down, face stiff with polite embarrassment. Haley leaned back, satisfied. I smiled. Not the kind of smile they were used to, the kind that said, "You have no idea what's coming." I set down my fork, turned toward her, and asked, "How does it feel when this useless one stops paying your bills?" Silence. It dropped like a guillotine. Forks froze midair. Wine glasses hovered. Haley blinked. "What?" she said, trying to laugh. I didn't flinch. "The utility bills I covered when your cafe account overdrafted. I began the tuition I paid for Olivia's preschool. The business loan I co-signed when you couldn't get approval. The $40 I transferred in 2018 to stop your cafe from going under." I turned to the table. I have receipts, by the way. Not that anyone here ever asked. Haley's smile faded. "You're making this up," she said, voice cracking. I reached into my bag, pulled out a folder, and laid it gently on the table. "I'm not," I said. "Here's the loan agreement with my signature. The bank statements, the monthly transfers. I have been your silent investor for nearly a decade. My father's voice cut through. Lena, that's enough. I looked at him. No, Dad, I said. It's finally enough. I've been giving and giving while she mocked me while you all laughed. You let her call me useless and you laughed. Mom's hand trembled as she picked up her napkin. We didn't know. You didn't want to know, I said softly. Haley's voice rose. This is pathetic, Lena. What do you want, applause? You're throwing this in our faces during Thanksgiving. No, I said I'm throwing off the weight I've carried for years. I stood up. My chair scraped the hardwood. You want to know how I feel, Haley? I looked her straight in the eye. I feel relieved because for once I'm not going to clean up after you. I canceled the monthly transfer. I notified the bank of my intention to sell my 60% stake in the cafe. You'll need to learn how to operate without me. Her mouth fell open. 60. You don't own 60%. Yes, I do. I interrupted. You signed it. I invested when no one else would. You didn't read the paperwork. I kept quiet. That was my mistake. Dad stood face red. You're tearing this family apart. No, I said calmly. I've been the one holding it together. And with that, I gathered my things and left the room. Behind me, no one spoke. No one moved. It was the first time in 32 years that I walked away before they asked me to fix something, and it felt like oxygen. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was afraid I'd gone too far, but because I knew I hadn't. For the first time in my life, I had told the truth, not just to them, but to myself. By morning, my phone was buzzing 6 missed calls from my mother, 2 voicemails from Dad, and 1 text from Haley. Wow. Hope humiliating your family felt good. You're disgusting. I didn't respond. Instead, I made coffee, opened my laptop, and reviewed the legal documents tied to the Cafe I's 60% ownership notarized and recorded. I emailed my lawyer asking her to begin preparing the papers to trigger a formal buyout unless Haley could provide a counteroffer within 30 days. It was business now, cold clean. That evening, someone buzzed my apartment. I checked the camera feed. Mom. Her eyes were red lips tight. When I opened the door, she stepped inside without a word, clutching her purse like it was holding her together. I just wanted to talk, she said. We sat on opposite ends of the couch like strangers. You didn't have to do that at dinner, she whispered after a moment. Didn't I? I replied. It was a family holiday. I stared at her. So was every birthday where Haley got the spotlight, every Christmas where I gave more than I got, every Sunday dinner where I paid for groceries and watched you all laugh like I didn't exist. Her gaze dropped. She's struggling, Lena. You know that. I know. I said she's always struggling and I've always fixed it. And now you're punishing her. I inhaled slowly. No, I'm stopping. That's different. She reached for my hand, but I pulled it back. I don't want this to tear us apart, she said softly. It already did, Mom. I said years ago you just didn't notice. She flinched. You should talk to your sister, she tried again. She mocked me in front of everyone I said, called me useless, and none of you stopped her. She was joking. She wasn't, and neither am I. Silence. Then she asked quietly, So that's it? You're just walking away? I stood up, my voice calm. No, I'm staying right where I am. I'm just done chasing a family that never saw me unless I was useful. She looked at me, really looked, for the first time in years. But instead of speaking, she stood and walked toward the door. Happy Thanksgiving, Mom, I said gently. She paused at the threshold. We miss you, she said. No, I replied. You miss what I gave. Then I closed the door. Behind it, for the first time, was my own life, untangled, uncompromised, and finally quiet. 3 days after Thanksgiving, the silence broke. Not with words, but with noise. Emails, texts, voicemails, all from Haley. Suppliers are backing out. Payroll bounced. If you don't reverse this, I swear I'll sue. The last one came in all caps. I didn't answer. Instead, I forwarded everything to my lawyer, Erica Jansen, a woman who didn't blink at threats, especially from someone who hadn't read her own contract. Haley's final text of the day read, "You may own 60%, but this was my dream. You're killing it out of spite." Spite, no. What I felt wasn't anger anymore. It was peace. I opened my banking app and confirmed what I already knew. I'd permanently canceled the 2-0 monthly support that had quietly floated her cafe for nearly 4 years. It was no longer my responsibility to make her dream possible. That evening, as I sat reading in my apartment, the buzzer rang again. I froze. Then I walked to the intercom and heard my father's voice. "Lena, open up." When I hesitated, his voice hardened. "Don't make this worse." I opened the door slowly. He stepped inside without asking, coat still on. "You need to stop this," he said flatly. "Stop what?" I asked. "This war with your sister." I raised an eyebrow. "War, you mean me keeping the money I earned me, holding on to the equity I legally own." His jaw tightened. "You're tearing this family apart." "No," I said, "I'm just no longer financing the illusion that we were ever whole." He crossed his arms. "You made her look like a fool at Thanksgiving. She called me useless in front of you and you laughed." His mouth open-closed. "Then that's not the point." "It's exactly the point," I said, voice rising. "You never saw me unless I was handing you something. Now I'm handing you the truth and you can't stand it." He stood there for a long moment, breathing hard through his nose, then quieter. "Your mother's been crying." I nodded. "So have I for years alone." He looked away. "I'm not selling the shares," I added. "If she wants to buy me out, she can send an offer through legal channels." He didn't say goodbye when he left, just closed the door harder than necessary. And yet, for the first time, I didn't feel guilt. I felt grounded. They could call it selfishness. I called it sovereignty. I went to bed that night knowing Haley would escalate. She always did when she lost control, and I would be ready not with apologies, but with proof. The letter arrived in a white envelope with a gold seal. Official, inevitable Carter vs. Carter fraudulent ownership claim. Haley had followed through with her threat, accusing me of coercing her into signing away majority ownership of the cafe in 2018. She claimed she hadn't understood the terms, that I'd taken advantage of a family crisis, and that the contract should be voided. I wasn't surprised. Desperate people rewrite history when the truth threatens their comfort. I forwarded the letter to Erica. She called me within the hour. "This won't hold up," she said calmly. "We have her signature, the notarized documents, email threads, the original bank transfers, everything, but it'll still cost you time, energy, money." I nodded. "I'm ready." And I was. Because this wasn't just about a contract. It was about a lifetime of silence finally having a voice. 2 months later, I sat in a small courtroom in Boston across from my sister. She wore a fitted blazer and a glare. I wore no makeup and peace. Her lawyer argued emotion. Ours presented evidence. When the judge ruled in my favor, Haley's expression crumpled into disbelief. "The 2018 agreement stands." The judge said, "There is no legal basis for reversal. Ownership remains 60% in Ms. Malene Carter's name." I walked out of that courtroom with more than a legal victory. I walked out whole. That night, I didn't call my parents. I didn't check for messages. I lit a candle, poured a glass of wine, and watched the rain against my apartment window. They had taken enough of me, and I had finally stopped offering. A week later, I received a letter not from a lawyer, but from my mother. Handwritten. "I wish things were different," she wrote. "I wish we had seen you earlier. I wish you could forgive us. Haley's struggling. Please don't shut the door." I folded the letter carefully and tucked it into a drawer, not to reread, but to remind myself that closure doesn't always come wrapped in apologies. Sometimes it's simply choosing not to reopen what nearly destroyed you. I didn't respond, not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. Months passed. The cafe struggled without my financial support. Eventually, Haley closed the second location before it ever opened. I heard through a cousin that she blamed the economy. Of course she did. As for me, I said yes to a new role director of financial strategy at a nonprofit empowering young women entrepreneurs. I spent my weekends painting again, walking along the waterfront, learning how to live a life that wasn't about fixing anyone but myself. Then one day, I was invited to speak at a local leadership event. The topic, invisible labor and the power of saying no. I took the stage with trembling hands and a full heart. For years, I told the crowd I thought my value came from how much I gave, from how many fires I could quietly put out. But one day, someone called me useless. And in that silence that followed, I finally heard my own voice. The applause was soft at first, then it grew. And for once, I didn't shrink.